Welcome to ParaTruth. Welcome to ParaTruth Reborn. This is a pre-recorded show. Already my cats are screwing everything up. Guys, sorry. Welcome, everybody, to ParaTruth Reborn. This is a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans and United Public Radio Network. My name is Erik.
And I'm Justin.
And I'm sorry for that immediate disturbance by the Hellcats. I was over here reading that, as we have our scripts, and one of them, who was at Salem, decided to jump up and just keep his foot on the letter J. And so as I'm reading it, I'm just seeing J all the way down the screen and lost track. Anyhow, I do want to give a little disclaimer for those of you who are not listening online and didn't see the title of the show, as there are a number of different beliefs surrounding today's topic. We are going to be talking about a very particular entity that is very highly well known, or at least considered among the paranormal world, and primarily on TV as well, as there's a particular show called Blank Ranch. This is an entity whose origins are from the Navajo tribe. And if you don't know what we're talking about already, well, it's a skin blank. So for those of you who are a little worried about hearing the name, as I know some people that we have met over the years are scared of reading the word or the name, let alone saying it, due to belief that something might happen. Just wanted to give you that discernment right there, just a little thing to acknowledge there. With that said, today we're talking about the origins of the Skinwalker mythology. Skinwalkers are something that have very much intrigued us over the years. In fact, really any entity that has been able to shapeshift in some way or form has been right up on our radar pretty much since the beginning of our paranormal endeavors. Now, with that said, let's talk a little bit about the Navajo tribe, which is also known as the Dene, meaning the people. They're a Native American group with a rich cultural legacy centered around a strong connection to the land. A matrilineal society where lineage is traced to the mother's line and renowned artistic traditions, including weaving, jewelry making, and sand painting, with their most famous contribution being the Navajo code talkers, who used their language to create an unbreakable code during World War II.
Now, most people probably have heard of the Skinwalker. It does come from the Navajo folklore, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it goes throughout multiple tribes because the legend has been shared so much. But a Skinwalker is a malevolent witch who, of course, just by listening to the name, possesses the ability to change its appearance. Usually a coyote, wolf, fox, or bear through dark magic. Is considered a powerful and dangerous entity. The term Skinwalker originates from the Navajo phrase "Ye Nalushi," which translates to "he who walks on all fours." Excuse me, folks. Skinwalkers are believed to use their powers for evil, causing harm to others through illness, misfortune, and even death. According to Navajo beliefs, a person can become a Skinwalker by performing a heinous act, often involving harming a family member and engaging in dark rituals to gain the power of shape-shifting. Erik,
sorry, you gotta move. You want
those last two?
Okay, I was gonna say you're sounding rough there, buddy.
Yeah,
yeah. Obviously, Justin's pretty sick here. Actually, well, you're still sick. Are
yeah.
you over the worst part of it?
Yeah, it's just laryngitis and congestion
Mhm.
now.
Yeah. Well, that's all it is. That's
Yeah.
just. Anyway, so one thing I do want to point out here, which is, of course, also of Native American belief, is the idea of the Wendigo, which in some ways kind of is similar to the Skinwalker, but in this particular instance, the fact that that a person can become a Skinwalker by performing a heinous act, um, often involving harming a family member or engaging in dark rituals to gain power of shapeshifting, is actually the same way that an individual can become a Wendigo. Now, of course, a Wendigo is more so a spirit entity, a spiritual being that is capable of possessing an individual who primarily either murders and or consumes humans. So a cannibal. When that act is done, there's a possibility that the person can be overtaken by the Wendigo, and then just become a physical representation of that creature. Some say it actually shapeshifts into the Wendigo form. Others say it's a uh, more of an act in which the person acts more animalistic,
Mm.
more evil, more crazed, that kind of thing. So some similarities there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the main difference is that it's cannibalistic, correct?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, that's the main difference. Obviously, like the Wendigo can't shapeshift like the Skinwalker.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and I mean, the Skinwalker, it kind of it seems to cross that line between a physical entity and a spiritual entity. In the Navajo belief system, they call it a witch.
Mm.
And depending on the culture, witches around the world have also been seen as either being human, being a demonic origin of some sort, or just spiritual in general. So really depending on the belief system and the culture, that could change, of course.
Mm.
Now, due to fear, the fear associated with skinwalkers, discussing them openly within Navajo communities is considered too taboo. And that is something I know a lot of these TV shows, especially like Skinwalker Ranch, some stuff that Ghost Adventures have done. We've heard about this. This is something that's been very much exhibited over the years. And more so out of respect than anything, people who come into Navajo nations want to be careful of the using the word skinwalker. But of course, that's kind of expanded itself among communities around the country, around the US, but also around the world. I mean, there are a lot of people who are afraid to read the name Skinwalker, who are afraid to say the word Skinwalker or do any sort of research in fear that they can basically empower the entity, and that entity may somehow invite itself into their lives. This is just another way of opening a door, as we've talked about so many times on
I
these
was gonna say a
shows.
lot of people believe a lot of different entities or spirits for that matter,
Mhm,
if you use their name or just have a belief in them at all, calls them to you.
mhm. Absolutely. Now, some accounts describe the skinwalkers exhibiting unusual behavior when in animal form, such as walking on hind legs or having an unnatural glint in their eyes. Now, this is something that we've actually seen on a couple of occasions via paranormal haunting stories.
Mm.
There's a couple of instances in which an individual, and one in particular, where someone had been, I think, oh, they moved, I can't remember if they moved into a house or they just happened to be staying at a cabin in the woods, but they kept seeing what they believed as a werewolf. They called it a werewolf or dog man, whatever, a canine like entity that stood on its hind legs. Of course, they didn't know, there was a lot of speculation. Could have been an actual werewolf type thing, or, dog man, could have been
Right.
a skinwalker, but they were very adamant that this entity was spiritual. They said they can at times see through it and it would be in one spot, dissolve, and appear in another. So that is something really interesting. That was, I think, the first time that you and I had actually encountered someone who claimed that an entity like a dog man was actually possibly spiritual as opposed to a physical entity.
Mm. I mean,
Um,
they say the same thing about Bigfoot though too.
no, 100%. Uh, and of course, we have the whole idea of the extraterrestrial with Bigfoot,
Right.
possibly being of alien origin. As for the unnatural glint in their eyes, that is something that's very common among many of these animalistic type entities. Yellow glow in their eyes is often seen, or a red glow. Some just say it's reflective, which is, of course, natural for many of these entities or many of these creatures. I mean, you figure the wolf, the coyote, the fox, they all tend to be nocturnal. And so their eyes will naturally reflect in even the dimmest of light.
Right.
Moonlight alone will reflect it. It's horrifying, really. We have coyotes, eastern coyotes over here. So they're much bigger than the coyotes you're going to see over in the west side of America. But they're basically part wolf, part coyote, part dog, and they're 2 to 3 times the size of the western coyotes. And when you see them in the woods, and they travel in packs typically, you see first this reflection, and it's very eerie, often
Yeah.
mistaken some sort of horrifying entity that is of some unknown origin. But in
Depending on
reality,
how tall where that reflection's coming from,
well,
anyways.
yes. I mean, obviously, if this reflection is like 7 feet in the air, then it's yeah. I don't think coyotes typically climb trees, but if they don't,
Weird
then
things have happened.
yeah,
Well, and that's I think the big difference though too is like most people see the eye reflection compared to like when people describe it as a yellow or red glow.
right.
And that can be just somebody misinterpreting the eye flash because those colors can be seen in there a little bit.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. Um, I mean, but even with things, I mean, there was a woman on a friend's show of ours, and she was talking about her constant encounters with a werewolf
Mm,
entity.
yep.
And she would always say that they typically had red eyes or yellow eyes that she would like say they would glow.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's more so a possibility that these entities, if they do exist, maybe the color of their eyes are actually red or yellow, which is often the case in many
Mm,
wild canines, such as the wolf or the coyote. You look at cats, modern cats, both domestic and wild cats, they tend to have very bright eyes,
mm,
golds and blues and greens. Uh, but even still, with that color up close, plus the reflection of the light, it can give the appearance that they're glowing and not
mm,
truly glowing from an internal source, if you will.
right.
I would say if they're glowing from an internal source, like if they're literally glowing, yes, obviously, possibly could be supernatural, but also not necessarily a physical creature. I would think more of a spiritual entity, since that's when we tend to see a lot of this glowing phenomena from things like
Right.
ghosts. Now, there is quite a bit of evidence and, of course, a ton of encounters regarding the Skinwalker. In fact, we have years worth. Now, Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, everybody knows it, right? If you're listening to
Yeah.
this show right now, I'm sure you know what Skinwalker Ranch is.
If
Um,
not, you should know what it is.
yeah, absolutely. Obviously it's a TV show. Um, or it is a TV show, but it's an actual place, which you know, just check it out. Trust us, it's worth it. It's worth the watch if you're into wanting to know more of the Skinwalker stuff. But Skinwalker Ranch in Utah is known for its rich history of strange events, including cattle mutilations, which some say that the cattle have been found mutilated with surgical precision or with a hole in the center of their eyeballs. This, of course, in particular, goes way beyond Skinwalker Ranch. This is something that has taken place throughout the United States and the
Right.
world many times over throughout the years. Um, and no one can quite figure it out. I think what's really interesting about this, though, is in the beginning, a lot of these mutilations were often associated with extraterrestrial biopsies,
Mm,
right? But nowadays, people are starting to say it's possibly Skinwalker encounters, it's possibly some sort of occult type thing, witchcraft, etc. There's a lot of different speculations now that are just growing, which of course doesn't answer any questions. It just broadens the theories.
right. Well, and when it comes to the Skinwalker, outside of if it is a human being uh, collecting things for rituals, if it's some type of animal creature, then why would it be mutilating animals? Because usually in the animal kingdom, there's no mutilation. They eat until they're full, and then the other animals come and pack it away till it's a skeleton.
Right. But then, I mean, and even if that's, yes, you're right. If that's the case, yes. But if this animalistic creature, this animal happens to be much more of an intellectual think, such as the dog man. When we think about, obviously nowadays you think of the dog man, it's just like a wolf-like creature that's on its hind legs and often all fours.
Mm,
But when you look into the history of the dog man, and this is going back thousands of years, even to ancient Israel, of these beings that seem to have lived next to or in, like as neighbors to humanity, they were often believed to speak or said to have spoken a tongue
mm,
very similar to the native language of humans, and they would interact regularly with people. So if that's the case and these creatures are intellectual, then they may have some sort of reason for these mutilations, especially if they're living somewhere like a cave, or
mm.
if they are, interdimensional or something. They're living somewhere where they can take this information back, and continue studies or whatever they're doing with it. I don't know, their rituals, etc. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I want to know, honestly. That might be a little too
Right.
close.
Well, and the whole thing, the hole in the eye, that's just what gets me is that's more of a human thing than it is an animal thing.
Right, right. Now, of course, with Skinwalker Ranch, and as I had just mentioned with the cattle mutilations, one thing that is common is UFO sightings. Now, some say that they've seen flying saucers, orbs of light, and other unidentified objects. These are both up in the sky, but also on the grounds as well. One thing that is very interesting, especially in modern day, is the more we see paranormal activity, the more UFO sightings tend to increase in that same area,
Yeah.
which is it's very curious. There have been a number of heavy hauntings that we've researched and have both interviewed individuals with who claim that there was poltergeist-like activity at these houses, but also at the same time UFOs seeming to appear above the home or around the same vicinity. Uh, Clearly, like just based on that alone, you would think there's some sort of um, connection there. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. Maybe. And this is one of the theories with UFO sightings. Like, why do we see so many UFOs nowadays? Like, just within the last 3 years, UFO sightings have peaked incredibly. Why?
Within the past couple months,
Within
even.
the past couple months, even. And the simple reason is because there are more people looking up at the skies
Mm,
and thinking about these things. It's, there's a couple of different ideas here. One is that if you were to believe in something, it can be like if you truly believe it, like you want to see a UFO, it can be manifested. Now, whether or not it's a true UFO or your eyes are deceiving you, we don't know. It could just be a
right.
sat. I can tell you how many people have showed video of satellites flying over claiming it's UFOs, but they're satellites or airplanes. I mean, that was happening in New Jersey just recently.
Right.
So many videos of UFOs or
Unidentified
drones,
stuff. Right.
right? But then when they like when I, click on the expander to see the video in full, it's like, no, dude, that's just an airplane. It's a continental airline. Uh, so people will see what they want to see ultimately. But I do
This
think there's
identification goes with anything in the paranormal, I think.
absolutely 100%. And then of course there's also this more not necessarily conspiracy and I want to say scientific too, but even that doesn't quite work here. But it's
Right.
there's a video that I sent you, which you had already seen. I didn't know that, but I sent it to you via
Well, I
TikTok.
didn't see that video,
Oh,
but
you
I
just heard
knew of the
about it.
theory.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a it's basically like I'm going to use the word matrix. It's basically like a matrix type thing where everything around us doesn't exist until you either A, look at it, or B, think of it, which is, like that doesn't make a lot of sense because I could tell you right now what's behind me. Now, mind you, right this moment, I'm looking at my screen, I have my notes up, and I see Justin, and that's it. What's directly behind me? I could tell you it's a bunch of statues with lights and all this stuff. So the fact that it's not, that I'm not looking behind me, I know it's there, kind of disproves that idea or that theory. But then again, it may prove it because I also am thinking of those things that are behind me and know what they
Right.
are, and therefore they're manifesting themselves. But with that said, yeah, this. I should just put it this way: the further we get into this century, man, the weirder things get, and the harder it is to understand in general.
I think the further we just get into this year, because it's just starting, the weirder it's
Bro,
going to get.
no kidding. We are off to a great start.
Yeah.
Um, so some other things, strange animals. Again, we've already covered this a little bit, but a little deeper. Some say that they've seen large animals with red eyes or wolf-like features. Again, this goes back to the whole idea of the werewolf or the dogman being of a spiritual entity as opposed to a physical monster like we've come to know over the last 1,000 years or so.
Mhm.
Due to my cat shifted my notes. Sorry. Now, electromagnetic interference is also something to be considered because some say that they've experienced electromagnetic interference, including drained batteries, malfunctioning electrics or electronics, and a magnetic field anomaly. Now, this is something that has been, and again, this is all stuff that is primarily seen at Skinwalker Ranch. But I would arguably say that when it comes to any sort of paranormal encounters, the same type of stuff that we're seeing here at Skinwalker Ranch is the same type of things we see at like poltergeist manifestations or demonic oppression cases, things like that. The idea is that these entities use the electromagnetic field around them in order to manifest strength or their physical attributes for one reason or another. We also have the idea of ley lines playing in.
Well, the other thing I really thought of when I saw that evidence in particular is when you're doing a paranormal investigation, one of the things you really have to do is get a base EVP or EMF, so that you can tell if there is just high EMF in the area that is causing hallucinations.
Mhm.
I've never watched the show. I really should, but I don't know if they've ever done a base EMF reading to see if maybe there's something there that's causing massive amounts of EMF. That it's just people hallucinating some of this stuff.
Yeah. No, they have done some base readings. There have been a
Okay.
couple of different shows, not just Skinwalker Ranch, but there's been a few different shows and paranormal teams who've gone in there and done base readings. Some spots they did find were high. Other spots they found low only later to have developed a high EMF reading. So there
Okay.
is speculation that there might be some sort of ley lines underground that are helping to make this place such a strong uh, well, basically magnet for these
Mm,
the spiritual phenomena, this paranormal phenomena.
right.
Now, some other strange events have happened there as well, and this first one is kind of, I don't know, it kind of bogs my mind a bit because some say that they've seen invisible objects. And I don't know. That sentence sounds weird because how does one see an invisible object if it's invisible?
Well, it's kind of like the entity that I had kind of brought up to you. I think is it the Glow Man,
Oh yes, no, Shimmer Man.
Shimmer Man? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, where it's not necessarily you see an invisible object, but there's a wave in the almost like a heat wave in front of you.
Mhm.
You could call that an invisible object, seeing, I should say, an invisible object,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's the way that they described it in the documentation that I was looking up. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but
So whatever these entities have or are, they happen to have Predator's cloaking device on their wrists.
Right.
Got it. Okay. So have we ruled out Predator?
I I have not, and I'm sure same thing with the Shimmer Man. A lot of people speculate that maybe it is an extraterrestrial with some type of cloaking device.
Yeah. Shimmer Man. It's such a weird name. Like it's an interesting name. So Shimmer Man, folks, is an entity that we are going to be speaking of in a future episode here in 2025. But there's just something about the word Shimmer Man that makes me think it's an entity that likes to possibly dance at strip clubs. I
Or
don't know.
glitters like the Twilight
It's
vampires.
like weird. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. It is interesting though. So we're definitely going to be talking about it because it's intriguing. Some other things that people have witnessed here at Skinwalker Ranch is, oh my goodness, sorry, cat just almost knocked over my lamp, almost took it off the table. My gosh, these guys need to sit down. Disembodied voices and experiencing poltergeist activity, while others say that cars have started and stopped on their own, or that they've seen a vortex in the clouds. Now, this is all something that all of these things really are definitely manifested during poltergeist like hauntings. And the fact that there's even poltergeist activity doesn't say that the skinwalkers themselves are causing it, but it's telling us, and this is something that I've actually brought up to, well, maybe it was on our last episode that I brought it up. I'm trying to remember who I told it to, but it might have been on our last episode, or at least the one that actually, I'm sorry, it aired 2 weeks ago. It was our episode
It's coming.
with Shannon and Ashley. It's coming,
Yep.
yeah. Um, in which a particular entity, especially a dark entity, has the ability to kind of cause other entities, lesser entities, to gravitate toward a particular area. It's almost like these evil entities are either imprisoning other spirits that are then causing a ruckus, or they're all part of one big, you know, thing in which the big bad comes in. It's like, hey, buddies, come on over. Let's make this really cool and really shut this place down.
Which just sounds more like something from a movie, but in retrospect, a lot of those movies are based on real paranormal activity. So,
Right, 100%. Uh, as for the vortex in the clouds, that's another curious thing because that is, vortexes in the clouds. Again, we have this connection between a land-based haunting and the sky, which then draws us to the idea of ghosts and UFOs and their connection. So just really weird, I think. It's intriguing, but it's a weird coincidence. And this is something that's happening more and more commonly when it comes to land-based hauntings.
just a quick side note: have you heard the theory that there's a vortex in the Mariana Trench now?
No, I did not. I don't think.
That's the
No,
newest thing for 2025 now is we have a vortex in the Mariana Trench.
sure. I mean, why not? I don't. At this point, nothing surprises me. It's 2025. I mean, hey,
I'm seriously starting to wonder if we aren't living in a simulation of some kind.
I mean, it's crazy. I have no words for it. I'll just leave it at that. Um, so there have been a couple of Native American eyewitness accounts as well, which, of course, is pretty much the bread and butter. I mean, this is like having the Navajo eyewitnesses that we've come across in terms of their stories is really the foundation of the whole idea of the Skinwalker, clearly. And like, in all honesty, if the Skinwalker didn't originate in Navajo country, would the Skinwalker even exist at all? That's one of the, I mean,
Right.
we could say that about a lot of things. So it's like, what type of what type of events or things have to be done in order for a particular entity to be created or show its face. Now, I'm not saying that it exists because of
Right.
natives.
Yeah.
I'm just
Right.
in general, you know, any sort of haunting, any sort of not even haunting, like just illnesses,
Mm,
deaths, just weird things happening, like car accidents. Like, could it all be changed if we all made a different choice prior? Right?
right.
Like, it's just, it's one of those things that rack my mind every night and keeps me awake way too long, and there's no answers for it. So it's just a
Right.
constant, you know.
Yeah. I totally get it. And I mean, half the time I'm with you there too, thinking about this stuff, and then it's like, well, now am I manifesting some of this stuff because I'm thinking about it?
Well, 100%, but it's true. It's like one of those things where I don't know. Um, like I'm trying to think of something semi bad without being horrible. But let's just say everything seems fine through the day, right? And then you slip on a stair, you break your arm. Okay. Chances are, if you went out a different door, you probably wouldn't have slipped and broken your arm. And the idea is every choice we make technically has a consequence, whether it's good or bad.
Mm,
And so, for example, if um, someone wakes up in the morning, walks into their kitchen, and has a heart attack, and sadly dies, would that still have happened if they woke up and went to their living room and lay down on the couch or sat down? Little tiny things, ripples in time. The idea of the butterfly effect, just a small little change could fix everything or make things completely either good or bad, could change everything, right?
mm.
Uh, I don't know. My mind's gonna be racked all night now thinking about it. Again. Anyway,
Let's go to the accounts.
let's go to yeah. So Native American eyewitness accounts. Um, one gentleman in particular talks about an incident with his grandmother when he was about 19 years old. She was half Navajo and half Irish. He talked about a time when he was younger, when he went to visit her. She always kept her curtains closed and kept peeking out of them on occasion. When someone asked what she was doing, she would respond, Yanalushi, forgive me. Justin, help.
Yeah, that was right.
Okay,
Yanalushi.
Yanalushi, got it, is watching me. When it was close to them getting ready to leave, his grandmother and his brother were in the garden when the family heard her scream, Get away from that creature. Being in Nevada, they thought she was talking about a scorpion or a rattlesnake, so they all went to take a look. And when they got there, they saw a large, black, Great Dane sized dog staring at their grandmother with its deep yellow eyes. It looked up at the rest of them, the family. Then, when they got there, it looked up at the rest of them, but when the family got there, it turned and bounded off. When they asked her what had happened, she said, The Yendaluchi has found me. And she moved a couple weeks later. I think what's also interesting about that, the fact that it's a large, uh, a Great Dane, a black Great Dane sized dog. This starts to move into the accounts of the black dog.
Mm,
And obviously, the scary things that people claim happen when you see a black dog. The idea
yeah,
being that if you see a black dog, depending on the account, one time it's possibly your death, or three times it's possibly your
which I
death.
believe
Either
comes
way,
from Irish folklore, right?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, that was the fascinating thing about this particular story is that whatever it was appeared as a big black dog. So that is fascinating to me. And these two stories that I came across are more modern recollections. Um, I hope at some point we can get somebody from the Navajo or Native culture to talk to us about these different things that come from their
Mm,
folklore.
100%. And that's something that we've been trying to do actually few times over the years.
Mhm.
It's difficult because typically they don't want to talk about this. You know,
Right.
it's and completely understandable. You know, we're not ones to really pry. We don't want to pry. That's why we do these episodes by ourselves sometimes. Um, but if someone happens to come along, if we find someone, hey, if any of you are listening who happen to be Navajo and want to share your stories about the Skinwalker and are willing
Mhm.
to, we would love to have you on to talk with us. Um, yeah. So another account is a case in which a gentleman talks about an incident that occurred to his uncle. Now, his uncle was half Mexican and half Native American. The incident took place in the Mojave Desert in Southern California. He was,
Mojave.
Mojave Desert. Just got to correct me right here in the public. And
Uh,
no, I'm kidding. I don't care. Um, the Mojave Desert in Southern California. He was driving around with his girlfriend late at night, and they saw something that looked like a huge black dog. Again, here we go with the black dog on the
mhm.
side of the road. He slowed down, and the dog began crossing the road. Instead of walking like a normal dog would, though, this thing moved like a toy rocking horse. He said it stopped in the middle of the road and stared right at them, and its eyes had a red glow. His uncle, of course, was a very brave man, but this incident scared him a lot. um, I think the rocking horse thing is kind of weird because that immediately made me think simulation, right? Like
Mhm.
something that should not have happened like that.
Right.
And I don't really understand why it would walk like a rocking horse. It's kind of weird. But one thing I do find interesting is that both of these stories talk about a black dog, and maybe it's just their way of um, describing the whatever they were seeing, because we know that the majority of the creatures that it turns into is a wolf, a fox, a coyote. Those are the
Mhm.
canine like, I'll say, because a fox is not technically a canine. In fact, it's a separate species altogether when it comes
Yeah.
to any of the canine or feline creatures, which is really cool. Side note, super cool. Canine look, but with, cat-like eyes. Crazy. Um, but they don't mention dog, right? Dog is not something that's typically found
Right.
in the Skinwalker's repertoire of what it changes into. So, what these black dogs are and how they are associated with the Skinwalker is curious. However, again, with the wolf-like type entity that it can turn into, whether it's an actual wolf or like a werewolf-like creature, it is possible that this is just a mistaken identity to some extent, and they just called it a dog as opposed to a wolf. I mean, wolves are not common. In fact, not only are they not common, they simply don't exist in the deserts of the US, at least not our typical wolves like the timber wolf, gray wolves,
Right.
red wolves, things like that. So it could easily be mistaken as or considered just a dog as opposed to a wolf.
Right. Well, and if these skinwalkers are witches, they would be changing their what they turn into to accommodate, modern times to still scare people. Um and the woman from the previous story was part Irish, part Navajo.
Hmm.
So that
Yes.
particular case, it is very possible it could have been not the Skinwalker, but the black dog from Irish folklore.
Right. No, 100%. That's a very good possibility. Um, it's also possible that these particular stories, well, maybe not necessarily the first one, because the grandmother was very particular on what she saw. Um,
Right.
but this one could be just a happen to be a black dog story, and they just are associating it with the Skinwalker because of where it happened.
Right.
Um, you know, skinwalkers are not exclusive to Nevada, California, that area, but neither is any other entity. Like
Right.
they can all exist in one spot,
Right.
typically. So it could very well have been like a chupacabra-like creature, for all we know. We don't know what a chupacabra really looks like. Could have been a dog. Could be like a black dog, right?
Right.
Chupacabra is often associated with both yellow eyes and red eyes, glowing in particular. So again, could be something like that. Um, I don't know. It's just there's a lot of theory. We can only do so much with a story. They're great. I love hearing the stories, but it always leaves me with the desire to go out and discover, right? To investigate, to
More
study it,
questions than
more
answers.
questions than answers, and it's something that we can't do because we weren't there in that moment.
Right.
Um, Now, would I have gotten out of the car to go figure out what this rocking horse-like dog was doing? Probably not, because I mean, I could say yes, but in the moment, probably not. I'd be like, you know
No.
what? There are two choices here. Remember what I just said about making a left turn or a right turn? How that could affect the rest of your life? Getting on that car is probably the bad idea, the bad choice.
Well, my wife ran out of a tent when there was something walking around, sounded relatively big. Our tent, when I first met her, when we first went on our first camping trip. So Shelly would probably have gotten out of the car and chased it down.
Yeah.
But yeah, me probably not, because I stayed in the tent the entire time.
Yeah. I mean, there definitely been moments, not many, but there have been moments in my life, like thankfully not many, because there's been too many scary, scary things. There've been a few, but I mean like out in the world, um, where something happens on what would be like either the weird or paranormal or whatever. And like everything in me, or in my mind, I should say, everything in my mind is saying, yes, let's go figure out what this is. Let's investigate this. But everything inside is like, nope, we're not moving. We're trying, but it ain't going nowhere. Why am I walking backwards? Why am I getting in my car? No, we want to go investigate this. Oh, no,
Why
we're
am I
driving away
not
now.
taking my phone
We're
out and
driving
putting the
away now.
camera on?
Like all these things. And that's something, it kind of frustrates me. I mean, it frustrates me that when people post stuff, it's always crappy images and video. But it also frustrates me when people say, "Well, why didn't you get a better video? Why didn't you, do this, do that?" It's like in the moment, it's very hard to think straight when you're witnessing something you should not be witnessing, right?
And
Um,
holding a camera steady in the
and holding
dark,
cameras steady,
which is going to cause the picture to be horrible as it is.
right? I mean, my iPhone is particularly set up at night in night mode to have a 3-second shutter, which means whatever I'm filming has to stay still for a full 3 seconds. And if it's paranormal, we all know that probably isn't happening. It's going to
Right.
move. And guess what we get? A blurry picture.
And if it's not paranormal and it moves, then people are going to say that it is paranormal.
Right. And if you turn your night mode off and take a picture, you won't see nothing because it's too dark. So we're just screwed no matter what. Pictures are not, I mean, modern technology still isn't the best technology when it comes to photographing or filming the supernatural.
For
Um,
real.
Maybe one day, but not today.
Well, speaking of pictures, I've got some pictures to share.
Hey, all right.
Um, these are a few that I came across. The first one is kind of a common one that I'm sure a lot of people have seen when it comes to the Skinwalker. So here is the first one here. You've seen that picture before,
I
right?
have seen that picture before. That looks more like a stick bug and an ape. Am I wrong?
I mean, now that you describe it that way, yes, it does kind of look like that. Now, to call it a Skinwalker, like, would it have been mid-transformation that they caught this thing?
It's very possible. Like that's entirely possible. It's also possible that it was just trying to create something horrifying for that individual. Kind of like
Yeah,
Pennywise would do, right?
right.
Reach into the fear.
Now, logically, though, what would look like this that somebody's coming across it, does a quick snap? Like, is there something naturally occurring that this could have been, and they were mistaken?
Naturally occurring, I don't think so, man. I've never seen that, but I could say that it could be faked in a um uh oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like in a I can't think of the word. Like what is it, like, like monster movies, like whatever, werewolf, they use costumes, practical, in a practical way. It
Oh,
could be faked in a practical way using practical effects. If you really pay attention to this, like I said, that face, it looks like a monkey, right?
mm,
If you look at the way the arms, the legs, and what is that, the pelvis look, this could very well be somebody kind of doing a bridge pose while sinking their hips down,
yeah, and
and then
then
put
the
a
the mask
monkey
is on
mask
backward.
facing backward, right?
Yeah.
So that very well could be something like this. Um, it could also, I mean, it could be a digital fake as well. It doesn't quite seem, the shadow doesn't quite seem to match up exactly to the creature itself, but it's close. I think the shine on the creature is a little odd considering we're not seeing any other type of shine anywhere else in the photo. Um, so there are little indications that are like, why does it stand out so prominently amongst the rest of its surroundings? Um, like clearly it's night. We would probably see some sort of shine on this walkway because of
Mm,
dew potentially, or even the grass.
hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, those are just some thoughts. Now, it's very possible that this is an actual creature that somebody filmed, or took a photo of. Clearly, it was probably a hunting cam, like a game cam,
Oh, that could have been too,
most
yeah.
likely.
All right, next one here.
Hmm. That's a very popular image.
Yep. Now for
Um,
us, the slide icon is blocking it, but you guys should be able to see it where there's elongated fingers right here
mm,
on the paw.
mhm.
Um, the mouth and actually kind of the face itself looks very humanistic compared to the rest of the body. Um, Now again, this could have been faked. This also could have been a wolf with some type of deformity or a dog with some
Mhm.
type of deformity. Um, if I remember correctly, this one was caught in Mexico. Um, but it is interesting that it does kind of have a human-like face.
It does, and that's definitely very interesting. Um, I was trying to find a book here because uh, there's a book that I ordered, or that I bought a while ago. I haven't read it yet. I think it's by Schreiber Whitley Strabler, something like that.
Mhm.
Um, and I can't remember the name of it. It's like, oh, the Wolven. It's called the Wolven. Let me look this up real quick. The Wolven book, please. Of course, it's not coming up. It's an older book. But in that book, the wolves also have elongated human-like fingers. In fact, it's the very first story to actually include finger-like or hand-like paws on a werewolf, on these wolvens, as they were considered or known as. Wolven were basically kind of like a dog man. They didn't transform. They were basically a a what's the word I'm thinking? Evolution, an
Mm.
evolution of the wolf, in which basically it ended up growing a human-like mind. They could think like people. They can act like people to some extent, but they were very much animals at the same time. So there were a lot of distinct features that are very similar to this image, which makes me think that possibly this image is just that, a fake image based on the Woven of the Struber book, the Whitley book.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good possibility. Again, we weren't there, so we don't know if this was a trail cam. We don't know if somebody grabbed this picture, seeing this creature walking around. But yeah, interesting one.
Definitely.
Next one.
This one is so intriguing to me.
This was actually caught in a zoo in
Yes, and
Texas.
that's what's intriguing to me. Do you remember when we had first seen this?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's intriguing about this is that it actually made the news, and it was the zoo itself that sent it to the news channel to try to get opinions. They posted up on Facebook, on Instagram, everywhere to try to get people's opinions on what this thing was. They had no idea. Now it could have been them just playing games. It's possible. But this is just so beyond intriguing because this is something they seem genuine. They had no idea what it was. They happened to catch it on camera at night after hours. And like looking at it, it doesn't look human. It very much looks animal in some way. Now, its legs are clearly very human-esque, right? Bend at the knee and at the hip.
Right.
It looks like, I mean, you can't see it, but it looks like there's probably an ankle there in which the foot protrudes forward like a human's. And even in the wrists. Now, the elbows you can't really see. It doesn't really look like it could be that the wrist is the elbow, and so the front, like the hand, could be very short. But also we can't tell which way it's looking. I feel like in this picture, it's almost looking away from us. Its body is turned, like its left shoulder is facing us, and its arm could be that we're seeing behind it is the right arm. On the flip side, because, and I'm saying that because of the coloration, but on the flip
Right.
side, you could see lines here that would suggest that this arm that's behind it is actually the arm that's toward the camera, and the other one is what's on the other side. Either way, the thing that this most, I mean, a lot of people are saying Skinwalker, werewolf, entities like that. If I'm being completely honest, it almost looks like Rocket Raccoon a little bit. So
Yeah, a little bit. I can see it. Well, and again, it's a night vision camera,
yeah,
so the picture's not that great either. But yeah, it's hard to tell what perspective, as far as where the animal is looking or creature is looking, and is it somebody with just a costume on the top of their body?
yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. I think I tried enhancing this image at one point, and even with enhance, I couldn't figure it out.
Couldn't tell.
Mm-mm.
All right, this is the last one. And this one kind of made me chuckle just because people
Uh-oh.
were asking, "Is this a skinwalker?"
Mm.
Now it's a
Ah,
little hard to see, but they're talking about this deer in the right hand side of the picture,
mhm.
because it is kind of up on its hind legs, and the front legs are down, kind of like it's walking on its hind legs.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like it's walking on its hind legs. Um, I mean, very clearly, this is just a deer. You know, people probably say it's the not deer as well as a possibility.
Could be.
Um,
And who's to
however,
say that the not deer isn't actually a skinwalker?
right, that's also true. However, there is a couple of cues here that tell me it's just a regular deer. For one, if this thing was anything but a deer, this other deer in the left corner here would not be standing as it is. It'd be a blur running away, right? Most
Right.
likely. Also, this deer that's on its hind legs, it's not looking up at anything. So it's not like trying to pull leaves off a tree. It's looking down. And if you look down right below its hoofs, you see two glowing eyes. Now,
Mm,
that could be the monster right there, potentially, and it's scared. Or it could just be a raccoon or really any other animal that maybe spooked the deer in that moment. Um, it also could be
Yeah.
another deer that's just down behind a little hill there, and they were, playing around or whatever, or fighting. I don't know. But I think there's basically, with all of what I'm seeing here, I'm saying this is not Skinwalker and it's nothing supernatural, except for maybe whatever those two glowing eyes are.
Right.
That could also be very giant spider. I don't know.
Let's not get into giant spiders right
Okay.
now.
Another show for that.
So yeah, the interesting thing too is when I was trying to look up pictures, that was the very few I could find that were not AI generated or whatever. But we've seen plenty of videos, whether it's on YouTube, TikTok, or whatever, of people claiming that they're seeing skinwalkers, and the animal is just off when they're taking these videos. Like the deer that's got its head kind of cockeyed and it's still running, like almost like it had almost broke its neck or something, but kept running.
Yeah, that I've heard about. I've seen videos of that too, and there's a number of explanations to it, which none of which are good explanations. I mean, let me rephrase that. They're good explanations. They're just horrible for the reason why their necks are broken. One could be that the neck is actually broken. The other is that the deer was actually shot and while being hunted, and it kind of does this weird thing to the deer where it kind of bucks out and its head gets kind of or its neck gets jacked up right before it dies. There's all kinds of different things, like that. So, but yes, I know what you're talking about. And yeah, a lot of people immediately jump to Skinwalker. I know that those particular images and videos I've seen 2 or 3 times in which every single comment on the thread was not deer, not deer, not deer, not deer, not deer. So, again, unfortunately, when it comes to many of the paranormal videos and pages on like Facebook and stuff, it's filled with people who just simply want to believe and will do anything to make that belief be true, right? You can show them hard evidence of something and they'll still say, nope, that's a not deer.
Right.
That okay. Well, not that there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but you're just simply skewing the facts. And, the whole idea of fact checking stuff was a big deal in 2016, and it's just making it worse by people, claiming something is one thing when really it's the opposite, and there's evidence to prove it.
Right. Well, that leads us to, what is it that these creatures, things can be that people are calling skinwalkers? Because science tells us that the human body cannot distort in the way, let me rephrase that, cannot reshape itself in the way that werewolves, skinwalkers, any of the shape-shifting creatures that you hear about do. So is it people's fear? Is it misidentification? Is it kind of a combination? What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, even with a science-based thought, right, explanation, I can still sit here right now and tell you that I very much do believe the Skinwalker exists. Like, I think there's plenty of enough evidence that it does. And we've seen video, we've seen like on TV, we've seen video, we've seen photos, we've had plenty of stories. When you count all those things up, you start to stack the evidence for it. Now, yes, you can try um, to explain this all away using scientific means. And in some of it, maybe can be explained away, such as high EMF, which maybe causes illusions. And with the idea of mass hysteria or mass persuasion, enough people go there, they get hit with the EMF, and they naturally think, oh, I see a skinwalker and the skinwalker exists, right? There's the same thing that we've talked about with Slender Man, same thing we've talked about with so many different entities, actually, when it comes to mass persuasion and persuasion and uh, hysteria. So, yeah, I don't know. I do think it exists. whether or not all of the encounters are truly a Skinwalker, that I can't say for sure.
Right. I do. I believe that there are things out there that can change, but I think that a lot of people let fear get a hold of them and then misidentify a lot of things, even Bigfoot sightings.
Hmm.
Um,
I
so
mean,
I that in that regard, it's hard to say one way or the other, but it is one of those things where it's probably a combination.
right.
Huh.
So there is some things that we can do in terms of discerning or trying to prove or disprove skinwalkers, right? So there is a scientific perspective on the skinwalker. First and foremost, analyze potential explanations for skinwalker sightings through the scientific lens, including uh, psychological factors and misidentification. As we just said, there are a lot of things, especially at Skinwalker Ranch, which could very much cause hallucinations, misidentification, etc. I mean, there are coyotes there, first and foremost, so that can easily be mistaken as a Skinwalker. And I know there's been a couple of times on both Skinwalker Ranch, Ghost Adventures, in which they show video of a coyote running across the field and immediately say, that right there is a Skinwalker. Okay. I don't know where the evidence is. It's just cool. And it's something that's kind of hard. You truly can't discern in that moment what is a skinwalker and what's a coyote if they both look like a coyote.
Right.
And they'll say, "Oh, it's got glowing eyes." This is nighttime. They're using night vision or infrared or something like that, which is naturally going to cause a reflection on the eye of these animals. You're likely not going to see them with the naked eye because it's so dark over there. So yeah, again, scientific reasoning, that's the first. Um, Second, discuss the absence of definitive scientific evidence for shape-shifting creatures and the limitations of current knowledge. That's something else you just kind of covered here, whether or not humans can actually reshape their bodies to um, take on these forms, if it was faked, I mean.
Mm,
Um, and animals for that matter. Now, in some
right.
cases, such as we just talked about with the knot deer and the seemingly broken neck and stuff like that, crap happens, sadly,
Yeah.
and much of that could be explained away um, due to hunting things, certain gunshot wounds, and animals getting hit by cars, etc. Basically all horrible things that eventually cause death, which leads us right back to the paranormal world where you may find their ghost. So
Right.
it's a circle for sure. And then the third is highlight the challenges of proving or disproving the existence of skinwalkers due to the subjective nature of paranormal experiences. And of course, this goes back to mass hysteria and all the other mass things that can lead a person to see something that really isn't there or misidentify an entity or creature.
Right. Anything that I missed in my notes that you can think of?
Um, Maybe so. And we talked a little bit about it, but the idea of the skinwalkers, like saying the name skinwalker, this idea of manifesting it by giving it power because you say its name. Um, I don't like, I'm not trying to intrude on people's beliefs here. Like you have your belief for a reason. I will say that I've been saying the name, I've been talking about these creatures for many years now, and I've
Mm,
yet to encounter one, yet to witness anything that would even resemble something like a skinwalker or activity that would be around like when a skinwalker's around.
right.
Um, so again, there's that possibility that when people do say the word skinwalker, um, again, they're manifesting things with their mind, not necessarily even bringing in the creature itself, but just misalluding themselves by thinking the entity in the mind projects that out into the world around you. So whatever you're seeing, whatever you're witnessing isn't really there. It's just part of the mind. It's manifested internally, and you're misidentifying it and thinking it's something real when it's not. Now, again, I say that lightly because I'm very confident that there are plenty of instances in which people who talk about the Skinwalker or say it's a name actually do manifest an actual Skinwalker. Um,
Mhm.
but whether or not those entities appear because that person's afraid of it versus someone who isn't, I mean, that's something that needs to be weighed. Now, I've said, now I will tell you, if a Skinwalker shows up in my life over the next month or so because of this episode, I will be the first to tell you and take back all the words that I just said.
Unless
But
I killed you.
then you're gonna have to get the EVP out and do a little investigation on air. But I don't know, man. I mean, I've seen very little evidence of Skinwalkers killing people as well, though. Stories, sure, but no evidence.
Right.
So, what is fiction? What isn't?
Right. Well, just like everything else, though, yeah, are you calling things to you just by believing in it, saying their names? It's possible, I
Potentially,
suppose,
potentially.
but in the end, it really is your own beliefs, and if you don't want to listen to this episode because of that, us saying it so much, then that's fine. Um,
I really
it's
don't
just
know. Sorry,
go ahead.
I shouldn't even say this because I'm just being a jerk. Uh, there's really like even you saying that you don't have to listen to it. They've already listened to the whole episode.
True. You don't have to listen to the last of it then.
There you go.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, it's one of those things. It's your own beliefs. I mean, we talk about a lot of stuff on the show, so it, I will say this: the one episode I did years and years ago about black-eyed kids, I was a little weirded out by all of the evidence, and even for a while, I had to keep looking outside to make sure that the black-eyed kids weren't fucking looking at me and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
um,
And I will add to that, like there have been plenty of episodes we did. Now, mind you, like what you guys have been listening to over the last, what's it been, 6, 7 weeks, more than that. I don't know. I'm not even taking account of how many episodes we've had on Reborn, but we've been doing a version of this show since 2008, and there have been plenty of times in which we have discussed things that seemingly did manifest something or opened a door. Um,
mm,
so, with that said, again, with everything I said regarding saying the name of the Skinwalker stuff, take it with a grain of salt.
right,
Just because I haven't experienced it doesn't mean you won't. But you have
right,
to understand yourself first and foremost in order to make a decision. And so, for many people who are afraid, that's okay. That's us. That's a good thing. God has given us the ability to have fear for a reason. It's a survival tactic, right? If you're scared, you should be scared and make the right decisions because of it.
right,
But yeah, again, there are ways to open doors. You can manifest entities, any entity. It can be done either through thought, through action, through words, through games such as the Ouija board, um,
mm,
through any sort of really anything can open a door. It just depends on whether or not there's an entity on the other side listening. And that is something that none of us know at any given time, no matter how trying to think of a nice way to say this or light way to say this. In tune you are to the paranormal. There are individuals who say they know what ghosts are around them and what spirits are good and evil and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I say no. That's not actually entirely possible. You can easily be deceived by evil spirits, and you can't ever truly know what entities are good and bad. And there's plenty of stories to go along with that in which people have claimed so and yet have been deceived.
right. All right, folks, we got a lot of great stuff coming up for you. Hopefully, my voice will be back for those. Um, Again, this has been a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans and United Public Radio Network. Until next week, where you will find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric. Peace.